Do you see a connection between mycelium networks and human intelligence?
Yes, I do. So the networks, I mean, they just look similar in the way that our brains branch and in the way that mycelial webs branch as well. And that format you also find in slime molds, which are my own favorite intelligent companion you can keep in a jar without getting into trouble. Um, but whenever you have an advance in language in human history, then our capacity for collective intelligence changes and our society changes. So an example of that would be language itself. When apes developed, I mean, apes do have their own kind of language. They have a whole load of signs. That's something covered in Neuroapocalypse as well.
Mm-hmm.
When we developed vocal language, then we could start to share the contents of our heads much more articulately with other people. And then we can start to put together plans and do things on a collective level that's very difficult for people or for creatures that don't have that capacity to do. Then at some point we went and developed language, written language. And once you've got written language, you can then pass ideas around on clay tablets or however much easier, but you can also store them. So you can start to communicate with people from former times, former generations, and you can start to accumulate knowledge. So then you can be sitting in a library and you can be collectivizing all of the research of whoever's been looking into whatever you're interested in. Then we developed the printing press to simplify the story. And with the printing press, all these new ideas start to get rapidly disseminated. And part of the result of that was the Reformation, various scientific revolutions, and all the rest. So all of these technologies give us access to a collectivization of intelligence. This is what Bruno Latour talks about. Now we're in a world where we can sit and have a podcast and we can get it out in a couple of weeks and spread it to millions of people if we're lucky.
Potentially, yes.
So we don't know what that is going to do for us. We have no idea. And there's a really interesting reflection, which is by Saint Augustine. Yeah, this is a guy who lived through all kinds of religious riots and great upheaval. But one of the things he writes in his Confessions, he writes that one thing that really freaked him out was seeing his abbot read a book without pronouncing the words, because back in the day that was unthought of. You would have to read out loud, and he was like, what is this guy doing? Witchcraft, yeah. And now pretty much everyone can read in their heads. So we have developed some kind of a step change in how our cognition works. Yeah. What does that mean on a collective level? So we don't know, in the same way that we didn't know what the car would do to how our cities are constructed. We didn't know what the printing press would do to how knowledge is distributed. We don't know what we're capable of when we come together. If you look at slime molds, right? Slime molds can, for example, they can solve mazes. They can predict rhythms in time. They live on moist logs in the forest. And when their log becomes dried out, they either form sclerotia, so they form like dried plaques,
Mm-hmm.
and those dried plaques can store information that they've learned about their environment. And if you wake them up a year later, they can still know how to interact with their environment in a way before. So they know how to store knowledge, which is incredible because they haven't got any brains. But the other thing that they can do is they kind of collectivize into something that looks like a mushroom. It's not a mushroom because they're not fungi. And then it kind of grows like a little tower, and it spores. They're not spores because they're not fungi, but it puts out these little kind of individuals onto the air current. Some of them even get onto insect wings, and they float off to other places, which might be moister, might be more conducive to their survival, right? And if you were to ask an individual slime mold protist, when it was coming together to form a tower, Or if you were to tell it, do you know what? You're going to be part of the tail that gets left behind and your mates are going to float into the atmosphere. I mean, firstly, I don't imagine that it has any conception of what it's capable of when it is responding to the impulses that are drawing us together. So now we're getting back to this idea of intuition, because I believe that beneath the surface, beneath all of these narratives and all these stories and all of these impositions, there's actually a current running through all of us, which is pushing us in a certain direction. And if we can listen to that and engage with it and follow it intelligently, and I don't mean giving up to some kind of cultic egregore, some kind of like economic hell where you're told to do all this stuff. No, what's deeper than that? What is bringing us together? I don't know what it's capable of, but if slime molds can survive when their log is drying out, and we're in a situation where our environments are changing, then I think I think there's all kinds of possibility in associating, in working out new ways of association, and seeing what emerges out of the mix.
Tell us more about the predicting or understanding cycles and time. What was your research around that? How do they deal with cycles?
It wasn't me who did the research, but looking at a literature review, well, one of the experiments is if you blast slime mold. So slime mold they're a little bit like amoeba. They like moist environments, and they move around and they get their food and then they network. If you blast them with cold air for 5 minutes, they start to retreat. They start to move backwards, right? If you then wait an hour, and on the hour you blast them again for 5 minutes, they retreat again, but this time they retreat more. And if you blast them a third time, you wait another hour, you blast them a third time, 5 minutes before you blast them, they're already retreating, right? And then if you wait an hour and you don't blast them, they start to retreat, but then they realize you're not blasting them with cold air, and they kind of, they don't retreat so far. And then if you wait a whole bunch of hours, they gradually realize you're not doing it anymore. But then if you start the cycle again, they've retained that information, right? So,
right.
I mean, what the hell is going on? That's amazing.
So they don't have a brain or a nervous system that we can understand, but they have this capability.
They have this capability to predict rhythms in time. So that makes me think about two things. Firstly, the way that we predict rhythms in time, the way that we can find rhythms on a beat, is because it's something to do with how cycles of messages pass through the networks of our brain, right? So we have a network inside us which is intelligent, which responds intelligently and can predict rhythms in time. So that's one thing. But also, if you think about what shamans do, or what mystics do generally, quite often they will predict the future. So I'll give you an example of this. I went to Kumbh Mela, which is a big gathering of Indian sadhus. And in fact, when I went there were 70 million people in 2001. It was mental. But one of the guys there that we met, I was on a film crew making a film about it. We met this one guy who was, he was called the Pyramid Baba. And he had this like naked, skinny Indian dude in a little hut. We were interviewing this guy. What do you eat? Oh, I just drink a quarter of a pint of milk every day. Oh, cool. Why have these guys built a 7-story pyramid outside your little hut? And what happened was he'd lived up the mountain by a village. One day he comes down to the village and he says, there's going to be a flood. You need to move your village from that side of the river to that side of the river. And they did, and there was. And so they really liked this guy. And it sounds very strange to us, to a more kind of, let's say, materialistic conception, but divination, responding to events that haven't actually happened yet, is something that shamans and mystics have been doing forever, right? And it's something that slime mold do. So obviously we know that there's something happening every hour. But do those individual slime molds know that? No, I don't think they do. I think they're responding to something, well, we would call it unconscious. The way they think is very difficult to understand, right? But there are these cycles which may be far too complex for us to understand with our conscious minds, which is how this links back into autism and calendar calculation as well. You can ask a calendar calculator how they know that October the 4th, 1832 was a Tuesday. They may not be able to articulate exactly how they know that. And by the way, I don't know that it is a Tuesday. But there are patterns beneath the surface that that we can key into on an intuitive level.
Amazing. That's fascinating.